Hey, who needs a haircut in the new year? The answer is Candace. Me, my very own self, need a haircut in 2023. Hello, and welcome to Miss Nifty C and her YouTube channel. I am Miss Nifty C, and I am so excited because today is January 31st. It's the last day of 2022, and I had a rough and tough year, let me tell you. I don't know if anybody else out there is ready to be done with 2022, but sayonara, my friend. The door is open. I am going to tell you about all of the 5-star books that I read this year. I read 9 of them. I am pretty picky about giving out 5 stars to books. They really need to be very, very good. I used to only give them out to what I thought was a perfect book. I now realize that there is no such thing as perfection, really in any area of life, and books are included in that. But they need to be absolutely excellent books. So I am pretty picky about it. And I read 109 books this year, and 9 of them were 5 stars. I had a goal at the beginning of 2022 to read 80 books. I surpassed that goal by 30 something. So let's just hop right into it. The first 5-star read that I read this year was one that I kind of knew was going to be good, but I didn't think it was going to be this good, and that is Rebecca by Daphne du Maurier. This book is all vibes, and then you get into it and you realize, no, it's actually all plot. It is the best of both worlds. This book is about our unnamed protagonist. She does not have a name. She is not Rebecca. Instead, she's a very young woman that marries a little bit of an older man. But his wife died a year ago in a tragic accident. She falls in love with him. They get married very soon after meeting. And when she moves into her new house, which is his house, his historical home, it's kind of a huge mansion, very old in England, she realizes that everything in this new house, every room, the way the servants remember and talk about her, the way the family and friends talk about her, everything about Rebecca, his previous wife, is so saturated into where she's living, into her new life, that she kind of becomes obsessed. Rebecca haunts her life, and it's her story about how that progressive, and it is so spooky and kind of sends chills down your spine, and you don't really know why. It is so great. I enjoyed every moment of this. I would highly recommend, if you're into classics, if you're into gothic, if you're into mystery, this is the book. I am going to read more Daphne du Maurier, hopefully in 2023. She is on my list of authors to explore. This is the only Daphne du Maurier I've read, but it was a 5-star, so I have high hopes. That is the first one. Let's see. Next, the next 5-star book, the best, very best. I still will bring this up in conversation, just randomly out of the blue, because I will take any chance I can get to talk about The Age of Innocence by Edith Wharton. I read 2 works by Edith Wharton this year. I read The Age of Innocence, and I also read a short story, Xingu, which I also absolutely loved. I didn't give it 5 stars, I think, just because it took, maybe just because of context, I didn't really think it deserved a 5-star, but it was probably like 4.75 or something. The Age of Innocence is a story about 2 people that circulate in the same class of, the same upper class of kind of like the golden age of American rich people, I guess. And it's all about how stuffy and stuck up and boring Victorians are, and how these 2 people try to escape where they've been placed in the class system of the Americas in the Northeast. And they fall in love. One of them is decidedly not appropriately supposed to be in love with the other. It's a very secretive love affair, and it's their story about how they may or may not work out in the end. And the ending of this book had me throwing it across the room. I was just, I still bring up the ending of this book with my sister. I'll be like, yeah, just like The Age of Innocence, and she'll go, oh my God, yes. Because it's just like, so the story grips you. The ending especially is one that I will never forget. I cried kind of with bittersweet frustration, but also satisfaction at the same time. I don't really know how that happened, but Edith Wharton, she got me right here in my heart. She is amazing. She's a crazy author, but also she was just a radical person. So I would recommend The Age of Innocence. It was a wonderful classic. So the third book that I can remember reading this past year that was almost perfect, I read pretty recently. I read it in October for spooky season, and that is The Graveyard Book by Neil Gaiman. I find Neil Gaiman's adult fiction pretty hit or miss. Sometimes I really enjoy them, sometimes I find them pretty lacking, but I always enjoy his middle grade books, and The Graveyard Book is one of those. It is a middle grade, and it is the most charming and heartwarming, but also slightly spooky books. It is about a little boy whose whole family is murdered, and he, as a little baby, crawls across the street as the murderer is in pursuit and enters a graveyard that is protected by a mysterious person. And this little boy is adopted by all of the ghosts that live in the graveyard, and they name him Nobody because they don't know who he is. And so they name him Nobody. They call him Bod, and for nobody, his name is Bod. And it's how he grows up and lives with these really loving people, but also people that are out of touch because they're dead. And it's his story of how he kind of wants to have his own friend, and he wants to be in the real world, but he also can't because he needs to be protected, because there is a murderous group of people out there that killed his whole family and also still want to kill him. And so it's a little bit of a mystery. You don't really find out why that is or how that's going to resolve itself until the end. And I cried so hard at the ending of this book, but it is so sweet. And I would recommend it to anybody of any age. I am clearly an adult. I'm right in the middle of my life right now, and I enjoyed it so much. I'm not a middle grade person, but I thought it was an excellent book, so I would recommend that one as well. Obviously, I recommend all of these. I keep on saying, oh, I would recommend, but like, duh, I gave these books 5 stars. I would tell everybody to read them, but anyway, yeah. Let's see, next book that I read. Oh yeah, I read The Red House Mystery by A.A. Milne. I think probably in the first month of this year. Yeah, I read it in January. And this one was a total surprise. I picked this up on audiobook, and really the only reason that I picked it up is because it was written by A.A. Milne. And I did not know that A.A. Milne, the very popular author of the original Winnie the Pooh series, wrote adult fiction. I thought he was just a children's author. And so I picked up this book and I was like, is this going to be kitschy and weird because he's a children's author, or is this going to be enjoyable? And let me tell you, it was perfect. I have read many, many mysteries. I actually read, I think, 24 or 25 mysteries this year. So I've read a lot of them, and most of those mysteries were cozy mysteries because that's my favorite genre of mystery. And this was the best cozy mystery that I read this year. It was so funny. It was twisty. I didn't know what had happened. I couldn't really guess what had happened, but our amateur detective and his sidekick, goofy bundling friend, are invited to this house, the Red House, that's kind of run down. They don't really, they're just spending the summer there, having a good time in the countryside, and somebody is murdered. And everybody kind of freaks out a little bit, but our two friends solve the murder, and it's it's just good. I don't know. It's just very cozy and it's very good. Cozy mysteries can be kind of a dime a dozen, but this one is outstanding. It really stands out. Outstanding. And so I really like that one. I'm surprised the cozy mystery made it onto this list, but here we are. A.A. Milne is a charming, wonderful person, and I'm pretty much convinced that I would read his grocery list if it was published. So there's that. Let's see. So that was a really cozy book. It warmed my heart. Let me tell you about the book that broke my heart this year, and that is Tess of the D'Urbervilles. I went on at length, ad nauseum, about this book when I read it in April, and I did a wrap-up video, I think the only wrap-up video of this year, about this book. I went on maybe 20 minutes about this book. Probably closer to like 12, but still, that's a long time for a person to just talk about a book. I loved it so much, I picked up my own copy. It is actually an illustrated copy, yes? Yeah, it is, which, I'm sorry, but this is life. I live for this. One of the most beloved books that I own now. Oh yeah, it's more illustrations. I just saw one. There we go. So, Tess of the D'Urbervilles. This book also smells amazing. It just smells like old book. I don't know if most readers are into that smell, but yeah, perfume. Perfume for the intellect. Tess of the D'Urbervilles is about Tess. She's very poor. A very poor girl living in England, and she's got a big family. It's hard to feed them all. And it's her story of how she meets the D'Urbervilles, a more well-to-do family, and how they kind of, well, meeting them, I would say, is the catalyst of her life changing. I would just tell you, just go watch my April video. This is the last book that I review, so skip to the end. The story is so hard to explain. I don't, like, maybe you can tell, but I'm like stumbling over how to explain this story. But Thomas Hardy, I've read other Thomas Hardy novels, only one other maybe, and I don't remember which one it is because I read it in high school, but obviously it was unmemorable to me. This one, however, I will never forget this book. This made me fall in love with literature, and I'm going to be reading more of Thomas Hardy in 2023 for sure. He's another one of those authors where I now have him on the authors to explore list that I keep track of. So Tess of the D'Urbervilles, one of my favorite books of all time now. Let's get into some nonfiction books. So I read mostly fiction this year. I'd say maybe like 12% of what I read was nonfiction, and most of that I read towards the end of the year. And The Warmth of Other Suns, The Story of the Great Migration, is one of those books that I read towards the end of the year. I read it in October, towards the end of the month, and so funny story, I put out a video about books that I'm looking forward to reading this fall, and The Warmth of Other Suns was on that list. And I thought it was about the Great Migration of the Americas that animals take, like geese flying. And I don't know where that idea came from. I don't know who told me that or where I read it, or maybe I read a review of a different book with a similar name and got them confused. But I'm like, I'm looking forward to reading about geese and stuff. This book is not about geese. It is about human people, real human people, and what they went through. And it is so much better than a book about geese could have been, let me tell you. I really doubt that I would have given 5 stars to a book about birds flying across America. I mean, it's not impossible. I could definitely see myself picking up a book that's very, very good, but yeah, I was not expecting this book to hit me so hard. It is a story about how in the Jim Crow era of America, when there was huge segregation laws being spread across the South, Black people picked up just out of the blue and decided to flee. They left the South so quick. There was mass migration. The railroads were clogged trying to get to the northern states as well as the western states such as California. and she follows particularly 3 or 4 specific migrants and their specific stories. And it was so personally told, but it also had chapters intermittently interspersed about the generalized happenings in the South at the time, and they were horrific. You know, you kind of learn in school about, well, you know, there was segregation and Black people had it hard for a while, but it's pretty much good now. They didn't just have it hard. There wasn't just like, oh yeah, sometimes they were lynched. That's like bad on us. We don't do that anymore. This is crazy, you guys. The amount of violence and hatred that was in the American Southern states during the Jim Crow era is astounding. And I thought I was pretty well educated on the facts. I was not. This book opened my eyes. It opened my heart. I thought it was excellently done. It's a longer book, but I didn't feel long at all. And I took my time with it because it was so heavy and moving, but I didn't ever want to just stop reading it. Despite its heavy topics and how hard it was to get through sometimes, I just wanted to keep on picking it up. And it's very rare that you get to that combination between the two things. So yeah, I would say if you're not usually into nonfiction, maybe you could pick this one up and it would really change your perspective and your perception of nonfiction. My cats are wrestling and making a lot of noise, so I apologize about that. You guys, hey. As if they're gonna listen to me, right? Okay, so let's continue with our nonfiction books that we read this year. Another 5-star book that I picked up. This is probably one of the first books I read of the year. I think. Definitely read it in the month of January. And that is Trevor Noah's Born a Crime. What is it? Stories from a South African Childhood. This book was the best memoir that I read this year, obviously. And I read a few. I think 4 or 5. I know that the darling memoir of the year was I'm Glad My Mom Died by Jennette McCurdy. I did read that one. I thought it was good, but it was not as good as this one. I would pick this one up in first. Pick it up first. Definitely read I'm Glad My Mom Died because it has a place in what, you know, we have to say about the world. But Trevor Noah's book is so exceptionally unique that I think this one deserves more recognition. Trevor Noah is probably one of my favorite human beings still living, like, on this planet today. I think that he has an incredible story, and I kind of really got to know him, I guess, in this book about what he went through as a kid living in South Africa as a mixed race person. At the time, the reason it's called Born a Crime is because at the time that he was born, it was actually illegal for a Black person to have relations with a white person. And that is what happened to Trevor Noah. His mom is a Black African American, or not American, she's Black African, and his dad is a white, I think, Swedish expatriate. So born in Sweden but living in South Africa. I think he was Swedish. I don't remember his nationality, but I think it was European. So he had a Black mom, white dad. He couldn't see his dad very often because he literally was illegal to be alive at the time. Existing was a crime for him. And his mom could have gotten arrested and thrown into jail if anybody found out. Well, if the authorities found out. So he spent a lot of his life questioning who his dad was as a person. He spent a lot of time, he lived with his maternal grandmother in kind of like the shanties, or I'm thinking of the Portuguese word. It's not favela, it's the slums, sorry. Kind of living in the slums that his family was reduced to living in because they were Black, and segregation again was huge. in South Africa, and so there's a lot of history. There's a lot to learn in this book. I learned so many things about the culture that he grew up in, about the country that he grew up in. It's solely about his childhood. So this book does not cover how he rose to fame, how he became a comedian that then became, who then became recognized as a world-class comedian and famous around the globe. That is not covered in this book. And honestly, once I read about his childhood, I felt like I knew him better than if I had read his actual journey as an adult in his career. So this is so funny. I laughed out loud so many times. I was telling my family stories, little tiny stories that I read in here, just like, isn't this hilarious? But I mean, the style that he tells these stories in is very much like a friend telling another friend. He's just sharing himself a lot, and it's really vulnerable. There also are times in this book and things that he says that made me cry as well. Just it's very heartfelt, and so this was definitely a favorite this year. Let's see, how many books is that? 1, 2, 3, 4, 7. That was 7 books. We've got 2 more. I read this book called Half Sick of Shadows this year, and when I was very young, I had this green book of poetry. I think it's the Great American and British Verses or something like that. It's ancient. It was published in like 1907 or some crazy year. It's so old, it's falling apart, but I just called it in my head my green book of poetry, and it was full of beautiful verses. I am going to be making a video this upcoming year about all of my vintage books that I own and my vintage book collection, and I'll include it there because it is so old. I don't pull it off of my shelves because I'm afraid that it will fall apart and then my favorite book of all time will be destroyed. So anyway, I read this book of poetry as a kid, and in that book of poetry I found my favorite poem, and that is a poem about the Lady of Shalott. It's The Lady of Shalott by Lord Alfred Tennyson. I think it's by Lord Alfred Tennyson, pretty sure. And it's a narrative poem. It's a story, but it's told in verse. And this book is a retelling of that poem in novel form. And because it was my favorite poem of all time, I decided to pick up this book. I'd never, I don't remember where I heard about it from. I think maybe I just found it on Goodreads or something, and when I found out that it is a retelling of The Lady of Shalott, I was like, yes, I want it. And I thought it was going to be like a fun read that I kind of pick up and I enjoy and then kind of forget about. No, I will not forget about this book. I cried like a baby at several points. The theme of friendship, and especially friendship that is imperfect, tainted friendship, friendship that goes through hardship but still stays strong, and friendship of women. The women characters in this book are so strong and so diverse, and it's really about them. The story is about the women in this book. The men are there, and it's supposed to be about King Arthur. Like, you read this book and you're like, well, it's supposed to be about King Arthur, but it really is not about him. It is about the women in his life and how they narrate their own stories, and they have a huge impact on the stories of the men around them. So I don't want to tell too much because it is a retelling, so if you read the poem you kind of know the gist of the story, although you don't know what's going to happen because the retelling is excellently done. It hits, I would say, the main idea of the poem, but not all of the actual events that are in the poem. And the way that they just wrap the King Arthurian legend and the poem of the story, the poem The Lady of Shalott, those two things are so well woven together. If you enjoy King Arthur retellings, or if you enjoy the poem The Lady of Shalott, I would read this book for sure. Pick it up right now. Go do it. Run. You can pause this video. I'll be here when you get back. So that was Half Sick of Shadows. That was really a surprise for me. A surprising 5-star. And the last 5-star book, the last book of this year that I gave 5 stars was The Rose Code. I read this over the summer, the early summer, and this is a historical fiction about the ladies, the women who intercepted Nazi messages and interpreted them to help the British Army win the World War II, pretty much. So if you've ever watched, what is that movie? The Something Game. It has Benedict Cumberbatch in it, maybe? About like them cracking the code with the, you know, spinny machines and everything. That's what this book is about, but it is about the women's division of that spy enterprise. So it is so fascinating. There are historical figures in this book. Winston Churchill makes an appearance. Prince Charles makes an appearance. And the women in this book are so diverse. Not diverse racially, but diverse personality-wise. They're just really interesting. You've got spunky women, spunky women, really smart ass women. Like, they're so intelligent. It's a crazy ride. And I really loved that historical fiction made it on the list this year, because it used to be my favorite genre. It used to be my very favorite, and it holds a special place in my heart. But I haven't been enjoying them as much recently, and so I'm really glad this one made it on. There are so many books about World War II. There are a dime a dozen. They're everywhere out there. And so sometimes I feel like I can't really find a good one, but this is a good one. This is such a good one. It's a great story, again, about friendship, about women and their strength and their intelligence. So if you really like female protagonists, pick it up. Pick it up. It's very good. It's very good. And that's it. That's all of the 5-star books that I read in 2022. I had a great reading year. I had a wonderful time making videos as well. I'm really hoping to make way more videos in 2023. My health is always very difficult to navigate. Like I've said probably in every single video, I feel like I need to apologize at the end of every one that I don't do more, that I don't talk to you guys more because I'm so sick, yada yada yada, boring. I'm not going to talk about it anymore. I'm just going to say I will see you in the new year when I make more videos. And I'm wishing you all a very, very happy new year. I hope that you are well. I hope that you are doing well. I hope that you had a great reading year. And if you didn't, that's okay. Forgive yourself, forgive the books, move on. We're starting over. And I am so excited to be there with you. Thank you for listening to me ramble. Thank you for letting me share. Thank you for being here. And I will see you when I see you, which is going to be hopefully very soon.